Todd Herman, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since I picked up your incredible book, The Alter Ego Effect: The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. I am super curious about this subject. I love your content. I've been researching the heck out of you the last few weeks here. I'm just excited for this moment here. Thanks for taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Well, hopefully everyone else is as excited after the end of this. So let's crack on, Hillier.
Let's get it, man. So first and foremost, where did your journey personally to the alter ego effect begin? When did you know that you had something here that could really change human performance for good? When was that moment? Do you remember?
So the moment when I adopted the concept and then become kind of like globally known about it was back in 2002. Um, and we were just talking about this before we started. I started a, mental game and performance company back in 1997. Before this was even an industry. I mean, there was a handful of mental game guys working with the pro level, but no one at the amateur level was really digging into this stuff. And so it was a slog to convince athletes and parents and coaches back in those days to take it seriously. But as I was growing my business, my name, my practice, all that. I started working with higher and higher caliber athletes, starting to work with pros, and there was this kind of red thread that was connecting all the best of my best athletes, and that was they were very good at switching their identity when they would go out onto the court, the field, the ice, whatever the case is. I used an alter ego when I played football. I'm not physically gifted. I'm not 6'4", 245 pounds, which like helps you when you're playing high school. And, I had a lot of college football scholarships, but I was very strong with my mental game. And that's not me being, I just was. And most of it because I had two older brothers who could beat me up physically. And I played mental warfare with them, I think. But I used an alter ego because I had this goal and aspiration of competing to my absolute best out on that field. And I didn't want the insecurities of I just couldn't put on weight. Like my big issue was, I was like, 6 feet, but I was like 159 pounds soaking wet. And so I used an alter ego named Geronimo that I stepped into when I went out onto that field. Now, the problem for every opponent was you thought you had scrawny little number 17 coming at you, but you didn't. You had a tribe of 8 coming as like I get shivers every single time I think about because I can step into that state. And I would I would destroy people because of it. And some of it's because when you see someone smaller than you coming at you, maybe you don't break down. Like in football, you got to break down. Low man wins, all that. And in a the alter ego wasn't the only thing. I also practiced my skills, but I would explode through an athlete. But there's this kind of magic that we can't explain with science. I mean, my company that I built, it was the largest in the world when I sold it to Real Madrid, in a peak performance mental game world, and impacting millions every single year with our training. And I built a lot of it off of science. Because back in those days, everything was like sports like this, sports like that. Well, what people don't understand is there's a lot of mythology in sports psychology. It's the least sciencey of all of the different disciplines. So I indexed my two first hires were neuroscientists back in the late 90s when neuroscience wasn't even a popular subject. But there's still an unexplainable part of the creative part of a human being. We just sometimes we can't explain it as to why we can do the things that we do. And so going back to 2002, that red thread thing, a bunch of athletes kept on bringing it up. And I would just say to them, oh, that's really cool. I did the same thing. I used an alter ego. Never really thought of it as a major concept to build performance off of. And then it was a U.S. Olympic swimmer competing for the upcoming Athens Games in Greece in 2004, where she just mentioned she called it her secret identity. Other people would say a character, an identity, an alter ego, all sorts of words, persona. But it just flicked. All of a sudden, these dominoes fell in my head. I'm like, wait a second, this is an actual thing. And then I would go back and I interviewed all past clients that used it. I'm like, how did you do it? Like, what was your process? Why did you get into it? What was its purpose? All this thing. And I built out the method. And that's what it's a very specific concept. but that was my angle of attack. And why I got to work with the biggest athletes in the world is because I worked at the level of speed. And what I want everyone that's listening to understand is when you change your identity, everything changes with it. Whatever behaviors, beliefs, thoughts, attitudes that you've got that you struggle against, all that stuff sits on top of your identity. And so that's why I could come in on a Wednesday, get called for the US Open in Flushing Meadows in New York City, and I could shift someone before their game was on Saturday. Very few people in our world would ever take that up. I was just the one who raised my hand and said, no, 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 I can change you in an hour.
Hmm.
Because I had the method, and it's also based on just the human psyche. It's for me, it was just performance. And that's just my Cheerios, man. I eat that stuff every freaking day. Still do.
I love it, man. There's a lot of people that are tuning in that understand alter ego. Some people, this is a brand new topic. Could you just talk a little bit about who are some of the athletes we may recognize? Maybe we watched as kids or you watched as a kid. Who are some people that had alter egos just so the listeners can go, oh yeah, I remember that. Who are some of the people that put it out on the map?
Yeah. So, I mean, the one that's the most famous that I built is the Black Mamba for Kobe. Now, Kobe went and turned it into a brand, and I had nothing to do with that. But when Kobe came to me in 2003, um, he was going through what I call an ego death. He was going through some very massive personal challenges, which I don't need to get into. But the identity that he had that he played through before, which was, you know, for the layperson, is the innocent archetype. You know, he was the young kid coming out of high school, 18-year-olds coming to the league. He was MJ's little brother, all that. So in the world of kind of human psyche, we can live through these things called archetypes, which is just an identity type. There's the hero archetype or the warrior archetype. There's the ruler archetype. There's the joker archetype. There's all these different archetypes. And Kobe couldn't live through his innocent archetype. And the longer he tried to do that, it was just going to trap him. So we built the Black Mamba in actually a very short amount of time. And then, another one that there, you say that you ask the question around, like, what are some alter egos that we know about? Well, there's millions more that you don't know about, because this is a private mental game strategy. Even Kobe, no one knew about this is what people underappreciate about this. Kobe never revealed the Black Mamba until when?
After one NBA
2009,
title.
when they won the NBA championship. Because for him, why would I tell? It's a personal thing anyway, because it's your way of organizing your own mental self to go out and compete. No one else needs to know about that. That's why when people write books and they do research and they study other people or something, there's a lot of meat left on the bone, because a true competitor is not going to tell you what's actually going on between the 6 inches of their ears. And why would they? Because some of the stuff that the really elite people do would make them sound crazy to someone else. But, you're elite for a reason. It's because you don't think the same way that average people think. And I mean, that might offend people, but I don't care. I only work with elite performers, period. Like, I'm not here to work with the person who just wants to be the also ran in a race. Right. And nor should they even pay my exorbitant fee to work with me, only to be an also ran. So the Black Mamba, Jerome the Bus Bettis. So Jerome the Bus Bettis, Bettis is an example of, people kind of associate him with the nickname, but that's actually not what it was. He took on the archetype or the identity of the bus, which is an interesting one, because it's not. So the Black Mamba is an animal. Mm-hmm. That's one way. And I talk about in the book the different ways that you can build an alter ego. There's the other way is a mechanical or robotic type one, and that's a bus. So, but why? Well, Jerome was very much a caretaker for his family. He felt like he wanted to take care of them. He felt like he had the ability to shoulder the load of other people for other people. And so when he was out on that field, some of it because of his physical stature, his attitude was, guys, get on my back. I'll carry us to the end zone. So that's the deeper meaning behind this stuff, right? And I mean, I get lots of questions around, is this authentic or inauthentic or authenticity? And I'm like, oh, can you please stop scrolling social media and listening to a bunch of has-beens or losers that are just trying to influence you with a bunch of crappy content? Like, come on, gang. I've never heard one successful human being I've ever come across in my entire life ever say that the reason they got to their success is because they were being authentic. Its root form, authentic, is applied to an object. Hey, do you have a certificate of authenticity for that Louis Vuitton bag? Hey, is that an authentic Lululemon t-shirt or is that a knockoff? Okay. We're subjective. Human beings are subjects. We're not objects. You can't put it. I want to use a label for myself, ergo like an identity or an alter ego or whatever, as my useful way of showing up and being powerful in a moment or on a stage or whatever the field of play is for me. But I'm not going to let other people throw a label on me because that's a trap. And so this label of, oh, I'm authentic, I'm like, come on, you got a lot more growing to do and understanding about how this stuff really works up here. So I've been throwing some hard freaking punches at bad ideas for a long time, and I'm not going to stop because I'm a practitioner. You're a practitioner. I'm out helping people in the gutter every single freaking day, trying to achieve really, really big things. And there's some really bad ideas that people have out there that trap them inside of these shells that make it very hard for all of your capability to get out of that field.
I'm curious, Todd, what's another myth or misconception people have about alter egos?
A really big one, in the book, and when you hear of other people's stories about kind of the reason why they created this alter ego, sometimes it comes from a lot of pain. I'll use the example of the pop singer Halsey, who's popular nowadays. So Halsey, her name Halsey is just simply an a switch up of the letters of her real name, Ashley.
Oh,
So she just flipped things around. And her quote that she shared when talking about Halsey is, I had a hard time based on my past as a kid, ever thinking that Ashley could ever go and do this. But Halsey, this new identity that I was thinking about, she could go and do it. And that makes sense because, your own lived experience based on your past can come from some difficulties, some challenges, traumas, whatever the case is. But when you reinvent an identity for yourself, there is no, puppet strings from the past. There is no, like, you're disassociating from them in many ways, and you're building a very useful identity to help you express what you feel are your true capabilities out into whatever the domain is, whatever the field is for you. And so I say that's not the misconception or the myth. The myth is that it can't it can't be very playful. The misconception about it is that we take it very seriously. This from a mental game perspective. The golfer who really grips the grip tightly, like if you've got tension somewhere, you've got no flexibility, elasticity, and agility in that, in the joints, in the muscles, all that stuff. Same thing with a soccer player who's about to do a free kick. If he's rigid, the snap of that leg can't get through and smash that ball into the upper right-hand corner or whatever the target would be. So we need elasticity. And I found that in the world, and this is often not talked about, especially in the mental game world, that for me, the final golden key that unlocks peak performance is an attitude of playfulness. That playfulness, because it's a relaxing mindset. Like you having fun. Like that's why I, tell people, like, you don't need to go and do, and Kobe did it right. Like Kobe waited 6 years before he ever talked about the Mamba. But it's like, if that's your secret source code that you're using, and it's like, you don't even know, like for me with Geronimo, you didn't even know that you were playing against Ronnie Lott and Walter Payton, along with my tribe of 5 Native American warriors led by Geronimo. So that was my 7. My 8th one, because I said you're playing against a tribe of 8. The 8th one was me, right? I'm including myself in that tribe of 8. But that was a very playful attitude that I had. Like, I love the fact that you think that this scrawny little shit, number 17, is you're going to absolutely bowl me over. It's like, all right, settle up, buckaroo, because it's going to be a rough ride.
Mm.
And that, I mean, still, it takes me nothing to get into that state, nothing to get into that state. And I would never share that. I didn't talk about this stuff when I was in high school or when I was in college playing. That was my personal playbook for how I'm going to operate out there. But it's a super playful attitude, and then it can relax you. Plus, it also brings you into your own process. I'm focused on me and how I'm showing up. And this, DJ, like all these little dominoes drop. And when you start dropping these dominoes, that first thing that we're looking for in athletics, momentum. Everyone else talks about confidence. And it's like, come on, man. No, confidence is the second domino. It's hard to get to confidence. You can get false confidence, real confidence, momentum. Momentum breeds confidence. And then if you can get to the third one, all bets are freaking off for everybody that you're going up against. I can take a 47th ranked tennis player and put him up against Djokovic. And I can equalize out Djokovic's better skills and abilities if I can get to the third one, which is certainty. When an athlete becomes certain that he can compete and win against anyone that he's up against, bets are off. And then that final state that opens up is flow. Momentum, confidence, certainty, flow.
Man, I love it. So cool. So it sounds like in order to get into an alter ego, the first couple words, a little bit of imagination, a little bit of playfulness, open-mindedness. I would also throw in my favorite word is curiosity. You got to be curious about, what is it that's going to work? What is it that's going to work for you? Reading your book, it challenged me to get into an imaginative state. We just had a baby girl, 7 weeks old. And so I'm slowly starting to get into what it looks like to, kind of go back to the Disney and the movies and all this stuff. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, the first step is you got to be able to have some play with it a little bit. You can't be this rigid person that's going to come is like, no, I'm too cool to like go back in time and see. Talk to me a little bit about, you have some really great examples about how kids, they show alter egos, and you have some great studies on it. Walk me through why kids are the perfect example of what an alter ego looks like.
Yeah. So, well, let's go to just the basically the scientific reasons why they're going to be better at it. So structurally, between the ages of 6 months and 7.5 years of age, to 8, a child is in what is known as the theta brainwave state, mostly. Okay, so just for everyone else. So at the very kind of top level, there's the beta brainwave state. Beta is like, the focusing mind, right? Like that might be someone who's listening to me right now. They're listening to their words. They're listening to our interview or, the podcast here. Okay. So you're kind of, you're just, and that's where you're also judging and reasoning things. So there's a critical thinking factor that's there. Nah, is this right? I don't like this guy's voice. Todd's full of shit. You've got to be authentic to win. Hey, that's fine. Whatever. Then the second level is alpha. And the alpha level is like real focus. Like you're sitting down and you're writing your paper. You're in the actual front driveway and you're really focusing in on the technical part of your free throw follow through. Like you're trying to get into that alpha state. And when you're in that alpha state and you're doing that activity, we don't want to bump ourselves back up into beta where we're judging ourselves. No, just commit to the act. Just commit to the act of what you're doing. And because you're going to have even better performance when you fall into the alpha state. Then if you go into the theta state is really where the zone or flow state lives. So and the reason these are brainwaves is they have a different band that they're looking at. Like, so there's flatter bands and then there's like, a larger band. So theta brainwave state, the zone and flow state starts to kick in with people. It's almost like a daydreaming state for some people. That's where you start to lose track of time. And your creative mind really opens up a lot inside the theta brainwave state. Okay. So kids 6 months to 7.5, they're naturally in that theta brainwave state. Why is that? Well, as human beings, we have so much to learn about the world around us. We have so many skills to build. crawling, then walking, then running. Riding a bike is an extremely complex, I mean, people underappreciate it. You can ride a bike now, I can ride a bike. It's actually a very complex set of motor movements to do that type of thing. And so we got to learn to talk. We got to learn to communicate. We got to learn when to communicate. Like, anyone that's been around a little kid in a grocery store and they point at someone and say, "Mommy, why is that person so fat?" And you're like, "Can you like, appreciate the honesty there, buckaroo, but let's pump the brakes on that." So that they're just absorbing. They're a sponge and learning so much from their parents, from their friends, siblings, whatever. Okay. What's key about that is a child doesn't have a sense of me or myself. They don't think of themselves as being separated from the world around them at that age. And because of that, they don't have an identity, which is why they're so good at 1 minute jumping off the couch as Black Panther. The next minute, they're out in the front yard playing with mom or dad and saying like, "Oh, I'm going to be like, insert name of like superstar athlete for whatever game that they're playing." And it's because there's no me that's there. Like, they're free to just express through these sources of inspiration. That's really important because what I just gave you is basically the entire structure and synopsis of why alter egos work so well. There's disassociation. You're far more creative. It's a playful way. It's you not getting trapped inside of a me that was really constructed by someone else or other influences anyway, right? And so kids are just naturally good at it. Then what happens, DJ? I mean, you remember it. You may be in grade 3 and you're like, "Oh, those grade 5 kids, they're so much cooler. I'm going to be like them." And so you look at what you did in grade 2 and you're like, "Oh, that's being silly, or that's being childish. I'm not going to do that anymore." Why is that? Because structurally, the frontal lobe of the brain starts to develop. The frontal lobe right behind your forehead is where reasoning and judgment skills sit. So now you start to judge yourself differently, reason yourself differently, look at other people and think, "Oh, I want to be like that," or look at what they're cooler. They don't, well, I'm not going to wear a Pokemon t-shirt anymore. I'm going to wear, this. That's what little kids do and all that. So that's the teen battle. So for the teenager out there is, the more you can stay connected to this creative imagination. The greats talk about it. Probably the athlete who is the best. I haven't met an athlete or spoken to an athlete or seen an interview of an athlete that is any better than this one guy at unpacking how he was able to be, I think, the greatest athlete in team sports in North America. And it's not even close between him and Michael Jordan, because you can just look at the stats, and it's Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky's stats against every other hockey player to ever play the game, MJ doesn't even come close to the domination that Wayne Gretzky had. But Wayne is the best at unpacking that. His quote is, "Skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been." Well, that's called ice vision. In the basketball world, it's court vision, being able to see things. In soccer, it's called field vision, being able to read how plays work and stuff. Well, that's tapping into your creative imagination based on patterns, based on precognition, based on past experiences and decision skills and stuff. But to the teen, be very cautious about who you think are your influences that are out there. This goes beyond sport, because, I can tell you with 99.999% of certainty, they don't have it figured out. Even guys like me and you, we don't got it all figured out yet. I'm world class at just a couple of things in this world. One being the 6 inches between the ears of people who want to be top performers or are top performers. Alter egos, I own that category. But I don't need to talk about every subject on the planet.
Todd, walk me through a little bit of, is there a difference between a superstition and an alter ego? So for instance, like when I'm training or when I'm speaking, I like wearing black. I feel confident when I wear the color black. I have my closet is color coded and the black section is
Yeah.
the biggest. Is that considered an
So
alter
are your
ego?
books behind you, bud. So are your books
Yeah.
behind you. So it's not
Yeah.
shocking.
So is that an alter ego? Is that a superstition? Is it something completely different? What do you categorize as the difference
No.
between those two?
So uniforms, I talk about it in the book. There's a chapter dedicated around totems, artifacts, and uniforms and the importance that they play. Um, and really it's about ritual. So no, a uniform doesn't make, or black doesn't make an alter ego unless I start asking you more questions about its purpose. And then there's this alter ego, or there's this identity that gets built around it, right? So the difference between a superstition and even a routine or a ritual or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
alter, because I wouldn't even put superstition in the same category as alter ego, but
Okay.
superstition in the category of routines and rituals, is that the superstition rules you as opposed to you ruling the routine and the ritual.
Mm,
So I had a Major League Baseball pitcher. This goes back probably 20 years. That when he was on travel days, if he didn't wake up on the side of the bed that was facing, so if he didn't wake up facing the outer window of the hotel room, he would feel like it was going to be a bad day.
so that's superstition.
Because yeah. So because he felt like the sun was shining. There's this massive narrative and sort of the sun's shining on me. It's giving me positive energy. Um, and now that's him giving up power and control to something he doesn't have control over. Okay. Um, and so, do you have a lot of control over whether or not you wear black? 100%, right? Now, let's say you're traveling. Your color is actually a specific type of tangerine orange. The airline loses your luggage. You show up in a place that doesn't have a lot of shopping, and you're going around looking for a tangerine orange t-shirt, and you're desperate with it. That's the superstition.
Got it.
And so I use that as an example because if that person would have just chosen black, black is readily available everywhere. White, readily available everywhere. Blue, readily available everywhere. Tangerine orange has a very specific color that unless I wear that thing as my underwear color or my sock color or whatever is a superstition now. So there, but it's a great question because there is this fine line. I talk about the importance of rituals. So
Mhm.
there's routines and habits, and yeah, good for you. That's great. That's table stake stuff. That's how I view it. Having a good habit, having good routines. The best have rituals. Rituals are very different because rituals actually engage the emotional side of the human experience because there's story and there's narrative around it. So you see me pick up my water bottle and drink some water. Okay, so the observer, the researcher, says, "Oh, I noticed that the best athletes drink water before they go out there." That's not what you're seeing because you're not inside my head. You have no idea that what's inside of here is the tears of all of my competitors. That's what I'm drinking. By the way, that is a direct quote from one of the greatest athletes in his sport. That's what he thinks of his water bottle. That's what's inside of it. It's the tears of every single competitor that I've played against and will play against. Ooh, and is it ever refreshing? That's what's going on inside of his mind. That's a ritual. That's a very different thing than a routine and a habit. So rituals, he's got complete control over that, right? There's no someone else could say that sounds like a superstition. No, it's not a superstition. That's a ritual. That's him engaging story and narrative over something that he has control over. Engaging story and narrative over something you have no control over, that's the superstition.
Got it. Makes total sense. Okay. Before we get into some of the nuances, another question I had about the alter ego is walk me through as a mental performance coach, as a performance coach, or even as an athlete. You create this alter ego, you're fully embodying the identity. You go out to this football game and you get freaking rocked. You guys get rocked 47-0. You didn't play well. Do you come off the field and go, that alter ego didn't work. I'm not doing this. How basically what I'm trying to ask Todd is how do you respond when the alter ego didn't really work when it comes to the scoreboard or you didn't perform well? Is it time to mix it up? What's the relationship like? Because I think it's awesome when you put on the Superman shirt and you go dominate a game and it's like, man, I love this. It's working
Mm.
well. Let's keep doing it. But what happens when you step into it? You really do. You embody this person and it just the performance side didn't go very well.
Yeah. Well, last time I checked, that's the nature. That's what makes sport the greatest entertainment that's out there. Right? That there is no script that's going to be written with like, and they ride off happily into the sunset, right? Um, okay, so um, if you adopt a specific identity to play through, and then you go out and you and your well, we have to be careful too. Your team gets dominated. You're not the only player on that team. By the way, other teams get the opportunity to go out and just crush it one day too. They get that opportunity. Um, so that happens. In that case, though, the main benefit of the alter ego is that you get to put him to rest and you get to hang him or her up or it up when you get off the field. And this is what every amateur athlete that's listening to this right now and parent has to freaking understand. If you take everything that happens on that field home with you, you are being ruled by your sport. This is one of the useful benefits of the alter ego. Its purpose is to play the game, to compete. It doesn't live outside of that domain. We don't have one alter ego that operates across the whole of our life. That's the trap that most people are leading their lives through right now is they think there's one Todd, right? There's one DJ. No, there's not. There's many sides of me. Like in this world, in my professional world, I throw punches. I've been throwing punches at bad ideas for a long time. It's how I'm built. I'm very comfortable. I'm not afraid to sit on stage and debate against someone else who has, more celebrity. I know where I'm the best at things at. I got no problems. I'm also not going to have opinions on things that I don't know anything about. But I'll throw punches. I'm built to do that. So was my mentor, Harvey Dorfman, who's the greatest mental game coach to ever live. He wrote the Bible of the industry, and I was able to tuck myself underneath his wing. And I'm a massive fan of mentorship and apprenticeship. And I resonate with Harvey because he's the exact same way. And he's known about that. He's known to be like that in Major League Baseball. So when you're competing and you lose and you actually play it through, Toronto didn't win every single time, but I went back and licked my wounds and I looked at the game film and I said, okay, well, what can I learn from that experience? How can I hone, that sense of beingness when I'm out there even more? Okay. I'm not going to throw this alter ego or identity out. It's an iterative process. And by the way, the very first one that you pick probably won't be the right one. I'm about to, I'm 3 days away whenever this comes out, but I'm 4 days away from flying into New York City because HBO is doing this biopic about Kobe Bryant. Okay. So I'm doing, they're dedicating, it sounds like, one of the episodes to the work that him and I did
Very
on
cool.
building
Congrats.
the Black Mamba. I've already done a bunch of pre-interview stuff with them. But the original alter ego wasn't the Black Mamba. That's not what it originally was. He came back based on some instructions that I had given him, and it was just the snake.
Mm.
That's what it was. It wasn't the Black Mamba. It didn't come fully fleshed, and then it built over time. With it was a short amount of time, just a couple months, but it was built over time. So just to remind people, like, it's iterative. And that again comes back to a playful process. Take it out there, have fun with it, commit to it. You have no idea what's available to you inside of this massive pool of performance that you have that's still being governed by shitty beliefs that you have, shitty ways that you associate yourself, your own level of self-concept, the fact that you do this laddering. So a lot of athletes do this. They ladder the different competitors that are out there. Oh, that guy's the best, or that person, I'm in the fourth spot. Well, if you're going to ladder yourself, you're going to play below those other three. If someone has an off day and they're number one and you've laddered yourself on the rung below them, you're going to have an off day too. You could have beat them. You could have destroyed them even. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff around. Yeah, you lose. So what? Yeah, you get dominated. So what? Welcome to the game. That's the game.
Sure.
That's the game.
What's
Now learn
what's
from
the
it.
What's the thought process, Todd, behind, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of athletes out there now that you help make the Black Mamba what it is. There's a lot of kids out there who want to embody the Black Mamba. They want to have that be their alter ego. And I
Yeah,
would assume that you might say, hey, for some that's okay, for others maybe not, or maybe it's smarter to create your own. But what I'm curious on asking you, Todd, is if somebody wants to be like the Black Mamba, but that's really not who they are. Let's just say they're more of a laid back individual. They're very kind. They're not
yeah.
that dog mentality that I kind of talk about. Is it something that you can really truly attain? Can you get to that point? Or should you look at more of like, hey, that's not really your style. Let's create your own alter ego rather than try to copy somebody else's?
Sure. I mean, style is, you know, you're right in that it's very, I mean, it's very nuanced with the person. But I also don't want some of the biggest breakthroughs that have happened with athletes have been by them embracing a completely opposite side of themselves
Mm,
that shows up in their everyday life. I talk about the one story of the tennis player in the book who was widely known as being a person who should be winning the majors, but then wasn't. Um, why is that? Okay. Well, it was easy to see that it was they would come out and they would dominate the game, and then they would start to take their foot off the gas. Okay, that's just an interesting data point to me. There's something else that's going on psychologically for that person. And in the book, I tell the story of we were sitting down at my one of my favorite places in New York City to get a BLT, Penelope's on Lexington Avenue and 29th Street. And the bill came and it was put on the table, and I grabbed it first, and she was like, "Oh, let me pay for it." And it was because a couple of times before I'd already paid for meals, and I was like, "No, no, no, I got it." And she's like, "No, let me pay. Come on." And she's I'm starting to see her emotions rise. Now, this is a person who's like super even keel, like super calm, basically the person that you were just unpacking. And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, this is interesting." And I'm like, "No." So I'm going to continue this because I want to see how far she's going to take it. And I'm like, "No, you don't need to worry about it. I've got it." And she's like, she got really mad. And, uh, and then I leaned across and I said, "And that's your problem. Your ruling value in life is fairness and justice. And that is why you're letting all these other athletes get back in the game, because you start to feel bad that you're beating them out on that court. And this is all very unconscious for you. And so you start to take your foot off the gas. You need to kill that person and make sure they never show up on that court, because that is not what sport is about. Sport is not about allowing someone to not be embarrassed. It's one of the most toxic parts of sporting today. No, I want you to have the full experience of what it's actually like to compete against me. The amount of hours that I put in, the amount of time that my family has invested into skill coaches or whatever the case is, you're going to get the full depth and breadth of what it's like to actually come up against me. And that's actually being fair, because then that person can come away from that experience, that game, that match, that tournament, whatever, and go, "Oh, I've got a long way to go." And you might actually motivate them. That's actually you serving them more.
mm,
And that was basically verbatim that conversation that we were having outside of Penelope's on the corner of 29th and 30, or 29th and Lexington, on the sidewalk. And she got it right there. And so that's when we started to build the identity of the person that went onto that court,
mm.
which was a polar opposite of this nice, sweet girl. Like, I mean, we're still honoring that person, but we honor them in your everyday life with the interaction with family and friends and things like that. But on that court, there's a different beast that goes out there. So to your point, or your question, some people need to embrace more of a beast type persona when they go out. Other people, it's maybe just a tweaking of a couple of dials when they go out. Like that's the magic and fun of this kind of work. Is the way that I view it is, on your chest right now, DJ, there is a safe lock. And my job is to just keep on twisting those dials back and forth. And then finally, I'm going to unlock, and boom, that's when your capabilities come flooding out of you. And you'll know it when it happens. Like I get shivers. I'm got shivers right now. I can, because I've seen it happen. You've seen it happen with people. Like, and then my job is to reinforce that with that person and say, that's you. That's the you that is actually inside of you. And don't you ever close that fucking door again.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I would assume there's also probably some differences on not only who you're talking to, but also gender. There's probably some different types of conversations that you're going to have with male or female. Another question I want to ask too before we get into that more of the
Oh, be
hows.
careful with that one. Listen, females have got more beast mode in them than guys do.
Totally, totally. And
Right.
that's probably what they need.
Yes.
There's
Like, I
probably
mean,
more conversations
there's
on
some,
that.
I've seen more stone cold killers coming out of the female side of the equation than I have on the male side. I mean, and when you work with a lot of women, it's probably the thing that's one of the things that they really embrace and they love about sport is they get to actually
Mm,
activate this other aggressive side that's just society as a in kind of the walking around world wouldn't embrace, but on that court, on that field, it's it's a different set of rules.
yeah, great point. Another piece that I wanted to get your take on was I think it's easier to turn into this alter ego pregame, right? You're either put on this uniform and there's some things that you do and it's before the game. And so you're really focused on turning into this person and embodying this person. I could imagine it might be difficult in a 2.5 hour game where you're really focused on the cues and the other team. There's a lot going on. You might forget about turning on this switch to become this alter ego. I'm thinking like middle of the third quarter and you've been at it for 2 hours. What's the strategy
Yeah.
to help get back into the alter ego when you're 2.5 hours in and the music's not going? You didn't just put the Superman shirt on.
So in the book, we talk about the importance of these triggers. Like you had said this when I was saying like, hey, like when it comes to the listeners, like what's some of the things that they would be consistently challenged by, and you said flipping the switch. Okay, so you're right, like that ritual that you can get into before your game to flip the switch and morph into that identity. There's an opportunity there in long games. Yeah, there could be that challenge. But in long competition, there are these moments of like resetting that happen, where you can notice that the tide is maybe turning in a certain direction, or you're becoming too self-conscious about your play, or you're concerned about the outcome of the game and the scoreboard. These are all what I call moments of impact. The average athlete will continue to engage with that thought. What I want to anchor with the listener is it's that moment of impact. It's a moment of impact because your decision that comes out of that moment is going to make a real big impact on your performance in that game. And so that is a reset point that you can do.
Mm.
So having some sort of physical action that you can do to reset yourself and you can, these are like microsecond things that you can do, right? Whether it's, the Major League Baseball player tugging back up on his Franklin glove that he's got for his batting hand, or inside of his mitt, or it's the football player that unclips the chin strap and then reclips it again. That was my switch. That was mine. When it comes to triggers, sound is one of the best ones that you can do. Sound is a very, very powerful triggering mechanism. A lot of people, when they're teaching visualization, get it wrong. They over index on the visual side. The reality is, and this might be comforting to some listeners, about 20% of society can't form mental pictures in their brain. They don't have the ability. But we all have the ability to record sound. And so really visualization is the wrong term. the kind of the thing that I always called was holographic experiencing. Experience is about using all of the senses when we're going through something. Um, and anyways, but there's these moments that you can notice, like, hey, when do I, like, just taking a little bit of a an inventory on when do I kind of like fall out, or yeah, it's a 3 hour match, it's a 3 hour game, it's a like, I mean, your alter ego can live on the sheet of ice during your period, and then when you're in the locker room, you can just rest up, and then you come back into it and you step into it. It's like it lives in certain places, it lives in certain context, um as well. So does that help
Totally.
answer?
As a yeah, one of the things that comes to my mind is I tell people a lot, take advantage of the pauses in your game. Because some people say in a real flow state game like a basketball or soccer, it's hard to, do some of what I call a release routine or etc. And so I really try to say, well, yeah, it can be difficult, but there's pauses in every game, whether it's a whistle, a timeout. Take advantage of the pauses. I think we're kind of speaking the same language there.
So here's an interesting stat for you. For soccer. And again, for anyone who's listening that's over in the UK who says it's football, you guys invented the word soccer, not us. So, buckle down. Uh, and I've done a lot of speeches over there, and I love to rib them about it. But do you know what soccer player spends the most amount of time walking on the pitch? Lionel Messi. No one spends more time walking around than
You mean
Lionel
like
Messi
pregame or during the game?
during the game.
During the game. Okay.
Yeah. Important stat to think about because I love the word hustle. Love it. Just did a newsletter article about it last week. Um, about how it's gotten a really bad rap in today's day and age. That's because people don't understand what hustle is meant to go do. But Messi is, when he's walking with a purpose of A, restoration, and B, it's not like he's wandering. He's walking to open field. He's walking to where the play is going to be. It's because he's got phenomenal field vision. And then he's conserving this energy. And one of the things that any competitor that's played against Messi will talk about is how deceptive his acceleration is when he's got it. And what they've missed is he's got the acceleration capacity because he doesn't have as much lactic acid flowing through his muscles. So there's some science behind this stuff too. But anyways, to your point about, like you said, to your athletes, like taking advantage of these pauses. Yeah, like there's playing the game in a very smart way. And Messi is just a great example of someone who plays it smart.
That's a cool statistic. I haven't heard that. Todd, would you mind? Could we go through just some of the? I mean, the book is full of it. And guys listening, this book, I'm serious, is phenomenal. The Alter Ego Effect, The Power of Secret Identities to Transform Your Life. I highly, highly recommend it. I've been through it twice now. It's really good. Could we go through like an abbreviated version for somebody listening? They're like, hey, I'm juiced up. I want to create an alter ego. Could we go through a few of the
Yeah.
steps? We don't have to go super in depth because I want them to get the book, of course. But can we walk through what it looks like on the how?
Yeah, so high level on the steps. And again, there's so many examples and I have so many like templates for people to be using. Even the naming of it, like the naming of it, which is in like, the steps that I give you is like getting into like steps 4 and 5. So step number 1 is um we have to choose an identity or alter ego in the context of a specific role of our life or area, or I call it field of play. So we don't, again, before, don't pick an alter ego that governs your entire world. That's a trap. No. So it could be, so many athletes have gotten even more value out of building the alter ego as a teenager for their academic side. The kid who sits down and actually writes the test. Because that's actually where they're most challenged by. So when I say pick one for a specific role or field of play in your life, okay, well, where do I start? Start at the place where you feel most frustrated, most challenged, or an area where you just want to have more fun, because that's the great gift of this, is it is such a great cheat code to be more playful. So that's step 1. Step 2 is, what is it about that way that you're showing up in that world that you're frustrated by? How are you performing? What results are you getting that you do not want, that you feel is you're under indexing? So I'm not playing with as much confidence. I'm indecisive. I'm worried too much about what other people are thinking of me when I'm out there competing. You know, I don't I pass off the ball when I should, when I actually have the opportunity, the space, the time, all that to take the shot, whatever. Okay. So you're not pulling the trigger. Well, step 3 would be, all right, then now we're getting into the creation of that identity. What are the superpowers that you do want? And typically it's just a flip of the things that you are experiencing that you don't want. So if I'm lacking confidence, then you want to be more confident. If you're being indecisive, then you want to be more decisive. If you want to be more relaxed, or you're playing too tight, then you want to be more relaxed and fluid out there. Pick 3 to 5 traits. That's what I call them. So your identity has a set of traits and attributes that you want to embody when you're in that role, in that context, in that field, right? So the secondary part of step number 3 is, all right, is there anyone or anything that already embodies those traits that you want to use as your source of inspiration? So this is the source code step. Number 3 is, so what is that? And that's where, the Black Mamba comes from. Or for me, Geronimo comes from. Geronimo was the name, but it was inspired through a total of 7, humans that I was actually borrowing from. Okay. So that's that third step is, okay, what are the traits and who or what already embodies those things that I can use as my source code? Step number 4 is now, all right, now let's give it a name. Because the brain wants to give it, when you name something, you give it form and substance. If it's just an idea, it's just this, it's like a cloud. No, I want it to be a thunderbolt.
Interesting.
And the thunderbolt is the name that you give it. All right. Because I get asked all the time, Instagram DMs, or when people comment on stuff, they're like, hey, how important is it to have a name? Critically important. You have to give it a name. Sasha Fierce for Beyonce has a name. Lady Gaga has a name for Stephanie. Halsey has a name for Ashley. Black Mom has a name for Kobe. The Boss has a name for Jerome.
The
Like on and
Boz,
on.
Brian Bosworth,
The
right?
Boss. Yeah. And he's a great example of an alter ego that ended up trapping him, because he'd never turned off the Boz. He never
Oh.
left the Boz on the field. He kept on carrying the Boz around when he was walking around. And it said in one of his documentaries and bios, he would have been a perfect client for me, because I would have told him exactly what to do and how to do it to turn it off. So step 4 is giving it the name. So we give it form and substance. And again, in the book, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can come up with the nickname for your alter ego. And then step 5 is finding the trigger and the totem for it. So I love using the physical world around me. So whether it's like I talk about, me wearing and buying a pair of fake glasses when I started to build the alter ego for my business, because I was terribly insecure. I wasn't confident, and I was indecisive. And so I went and bought a pair of glasses, and I did the reverse Superman. So Superman took off the glasses to become, which was really his true self. The alter ego was Clark Kent. The alter ego was not Superman, which I talk about in the book, and everyone would typically get wrong. And so I put on the glasses. It was me putting on my cape, and I would practice, and I would feel that. The great thing about putting on glasses is those arms, when they're passing by and over top of my temples, it's like there's a switch that's there, and I'm flicking it on, and I'm embodying the traits and capabilities of my 3 heroes there: Joseph Campbell, Benjamin Franklin, and Superman.
I think
Right?
I've also heard you
And
talk
while those
about
glasses,
did you talk about Tic Tacs once? You have clients take a Tic Tac and that activates. Is that right?
yeah, yeah,
Same
yeah.
idea.
So yeah, give me a second here. I actually have a bottle right here. Is it gonna zoom in?
Yep.
There you go. It's called Activate,
Activate.
and you're here. Activate. And it's a sugar pill. There's nothing in it. But I'll send bottles, because yeah, like imagine the source code of your of that heroic version of you sitting inside. And then when it gets inside of you, it just permeates through all of the cells of your body. But you
Freaking
don't
love
need
that.
to get an Activate bottle. I'd give clients Tic Tacs. And they'd rip off the label or they'd put their own label on it. And yeah, super fun stuff. And again, that's just to keep the creative imagination alive, and it's your own ritual and all that good stuff. But yeah, so like having a physical thing, and then it's like practicing, where does it live? Where are those moments of impact? How do I do it? The snapping of things, and like what happens with the state of your body? Do your shoulders go back? Like now you're in your, because again, you need to honor. This is why, like, you can learn about alter egos, but I have a method that's very rich and deep based on the biological, psychological, physiological phenomenon of the human body, science. And then just there's a lot of myth and mystery around this stuff too, because human beings are storytelling beings, so we should be honoring that. That's why rituals are way more powerful than habits and routines, and they are not the same thing. Ritual is about adding story to something, and the story is the X factor part, because that's the emotional connection part of your. That's why I can't sell you an alter ego off of a shelf. It's a very personal thing to you. That's why you were alluding earlier to, like, that's kind of what you were talking about when you were saying the athlete trying to embrace the black mamba when it might not be the right thing for them. I get it. You're very inspired by what Kobe went and did, but the black mamba might not be the right alter ego. And plus, no one really knows, with the exception of myself and Kobe, really what the black mamba was meaning. That's the purpose of the actual documentary, is for the first time sort of unpacking with people what was actually going on in those first conversations with Kobe. Like what was its reason for genesis and being birthed. So kind of long story short, around the 5 steps, those are your main 5 steps to go into. And of course there's nuance in each of them, but that's a really good shorthand for people to understand how to dig into the idea.
Love it. Thanks for going through that. Do you have a hard stop right now, or can we do one more topic?
We can do another quick topic. I got about 8 minutes.
Okay, cool. This other topic, this was great. I love this because I'm so big into obviously the mental side and self-talk. So you talked about in the chapter test trials and delivering the ground punch. I'm going to read this. This is so cool. Over the years that I've been teaching the alter ego effect, I've never had one athlete or leader object to the idea. I've never had anyone tell me they feel like being fake or even childish. Most of them felt it to be one of the most natural things they could do or had already been doing. Now they can battle the thoughts and don't serve them, just like you. No human is immune to the enemy. If you hear a little voice telling you you're being fake, or this is silly, or there's no use, you can't change, or who do you think you are? You don't have any talent. You're not going to make it. Understand this. It's the enemy that's trying to pull you back. And so you talk about the thing called the response proclamation. And it's our way of finding that second gear by having a well prepared response to the question, who do you think you are? Or any question in similar form to cause you to doubt yourself. This not only prevents you from getting on the merry-go-round of negative self talk, but it also causes you to stay rooted in your moment of impact as your heroic self or your alter ego. This is my favorite part, gives me shivers. I underlined it. A response proclamation is the weapon your alter ego needs. Here's what a response proclamation sounds like for an Olympic alpine skier. Who am I? Who am I, you ask? I'm the one that's woken up at 4:18 a.m. every day for 1,000 straight days to be the first one on the ski hill to get my reps in for this moment. Who am I? I'm the one who spends 45 minutes every day lying on my back, relaxed, and confidently seeing and experience myself race down this hill and execute the tight turns with my strong legs in great form so I can give myself the best chance to put up a time that what might win me a medal. I love this idea. This concept gives me shivers about who am I? We talk about self-talk a lot. I'm done rambling. Talk to me about ground punch and response proclamation. This is cool.
Yeah, I mean, none of us are immune to that, you know, whether it's avalanche of like doubt or uncertainty or unexpectedness that can happen in a game, our career, the moments before leading up to a tournament whatsoever. And I want to give people tools to combat that stuff. Like, I mean, I look at, when I'm looking at you, I'm personally objectifying you, and I'm like, okay, well, what sort of armor do I need to give you? What's what's the gun, the shield, the sword, the whatever that I can hand to you, that you can feel it in your hand. And by the way, you unpacked the second most highlighted part of my entire book, because I've got, it's my book. I can go into the Kindle highlights and I can see. And the ground punch, I've actually got a podcast that's now going to be titled the Ground Punch Podcast. And it's all about unpacking the kind of dark night of the soul moments of performers in, lots of different fields. I've already done a few interviews on it. But it's so important that human beings record your wins, so that I can answer that who am I question, because it's so easy. Our brain is wired for negativity bias. It's so easy for us to go, oh, I missed a practice last week, or, we lost 47-0. And I'm like, yeah, but you had 7 wins by 19 points or more this year. You've got 1 loss. Okay. So we look at this abnormality of the loss, or the thing we didn't do, or the thing we didn't execute on, or whatever. But you had better be, for your own state of strong mental health, be very good at capturing your wins. And you should have, there's another thing that you should take away from this conversation, is you should have a journal where you have anchored the wins that you've had over your life, the skills that you've built, the things that you've learned, the abilities that you have developed, the traits that you've been deliberate with fostering within yourself, whether it's the things that you've achieved as well. Log those things. Don't cheat your own confidence out of having those things. And so the response proclamation is just another way of me, because that enemy, and I'm just trying, what I'm trying to do is anthropomorphize, which is giving human qualities to ideas. The enemy is an idea. No. I want to give it a name. Like I talk about in the book. We didn't unpack it in the 5 steps, but I talk about, hey, give yourself the name, but give the enemy a name too, as well, so that I can battle against something in my own head. It's like, hey, you scared little shadow, get your ass to the sidelines, because you do not live on this field. You do not live on this court. You do not live on this sheet of ice. You don't get to live rent free in my head. And that response proclamation is because we can do it. It's just a natural vernacular that we have as human beings. Who am I? Oh, buddy, who am I? The one that you had actually stopped while you were kind of reading the thing is one of my favorites. Who am I? I'm the one that some little girl is going to be sitting watching as I perform, cross-legged on the ground, that's going to look over her shoulder to mom one day and say to her mom, I want to be like her one day, mom. That's who I am. So why don't you get your ass to the sidelines, because you do not live rent-free in this head. Because I am here to capture every single ounce of this performance. And just like any bully, it will slink off into the corner when it's confronted. And that is one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself. I can get choked up talking about it, because I have seen this happen with people. I can see switches get developed. I've seen people completely transform their future careers, whether it's high school going to college, or, junior high going up to high school or whatever, because they finally can own their sense of being. This is about, the entire book is about giving you back the steering wheel of your creative imagination, so that you can decide who the fuck you are. Not me, not a parent, not a coach. And that's one of the great gifts that I would have gotten from my parents. And in some ways it's baked into me too. Like there is not a ruling part of me that has a string attached to it linked to somebody else. I am who I am. I'm always going to improve, but no one is going to steer me.
Todd Herman, ladies and gentlemen, what a phenomenal conversation, man. I've learned so much from you, and I have a notebook here, man, from the conversation today, but also the probably a half a dozen podcasts I listened over the last couple weeks, man. I really appreciate your content. I appreciate everything that you've put out. I appreciate this book. It's been a joy to get to know you. How can my listeners follow you, and how can they learn from you like I have?
Well, I would say, before I even talk about me, like, to the people who are listening to you and consistently listen to you, you're in great hands, because there are I've done well over 400 podcast interviews. And the fact that you spend so much time getting to know a guest, like that shows your dedication to your craft as well. So people are in great hands. They
Thank
don't
you.
need to come and find me. They can stick around you. But if they were interested, toddherman.me is my home base on the interwebs. Most of my socials are Todd_Herman. Yeah, if there was one favorite nugget that you got from the show today, the thing that you could do that's the most valuable is tag DJ and I on social, and let people know, share it. Because beyond myself, I know you've got a very, very strong message that people need to hear about as well. And every little bit helps. Or DM us or DM me and let me know what your favorite takeaway was as well. So anyway, appreciate the conversation, bud.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it, man.